Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for welcoming me here to Malta. It is far from my first time to be here. It has been 6.5 years now since, well, what I feel like saying my first confession, but what I actually, of course, mean is since my first time here in Malta. And I will tell you a little bit about my own story and how I got started here a little while later, because it actually protrudes right back to FinanceMalta in the first place. So, when Kenneth Farrugia asked me to speak here today about Brexit, and he asked me for a title, and I thought to myself, well, you know what a lot of us business leaders often use as a model is exactly what you see in front of you, a SWOT analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and the threats of Brexit first of all. Then I'm going to take you through exactly what's going on in the whole world of Brexit at the moment. And then I'm going to finish up specifically by looking at 6 key opportunities that I believe are right here on the island. And to summarize, before I start, I actually think that all Malta needs to do is do what it does best, but in a more streamlined and strategic sense, because the opportunities have in many ways, for Malta anyway, been exaggerated, or a spotlight has been put on them through Brexit. But let me start off with the strengths. I have gotten to know this country over the last couple of years. I've gotten to know it rather well. I have gotten to know many corners of the island. I've gotten to know the people. And I've gotten to know a lot about how the way in which the country and its economy works. And to me, the country is full of strengths. Its food, its wine, its culture, its people, its sense of pride in itself, its value proposition to its tourists, its work ethic. There are many of those things that we might say as in every country, but for Malta it's different. The Maltese people here have welcomed me and often embraced me with open arms as I've come over here, and it's a particularly strong nation in terms of its pride. Now, I'm sure you know, coming from Ireland, we have a fair bit of that too, but the way in which Malta does it, it just does it differently, and it does it intangibly. But what I notice as I go around this country is that a lot of people here love being here. And I have often spoken to people in Malta, and they've gone away on holidays, and they tell me, you know what, Susan, on the last couple of days, I just couldn't wait to get back. I just couldn't wait to come back and just to see the expanse of the sea in front of me. I couldn't wait to come back and just hear the dulcet tones of the Maltese language. I really, really love it here. And that's its own people. And then I talk to people who've moved here. So I speak to the Irish diaspora, I speak to a range of people who have come here from the UK, etc. And I tell them, or I ask them, what is it that brought you to Malta? And they say, the lifestyle. And I said, tell me exactly what you mean by that. And they say, well, there's a difference the way in which people are treated here. The government encourages people to go back to work via providing childcare, almost free childcare up until school-going age. Restaurants, banking, various other different sectors facilitate a family focus. There's a deeply, deeply, deeply entrenched values around the Christian religion here. And all of those, they tell me, all of those are the reason that when we come here, we want to stay. And as I look back on my own number of years, when I think about how I feel, when I feel the plane landing in MIA, it's like a sense, at this stage, it feels like Malta has taken just a little piece of my heart, but it keeps on growing that part of it all the time. And I have to say, there is nowhere in the world, nowhere at all in the world that I have found to be better for blue sky thinking than sitting on the steps of Baluta Bay. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that the Irish pub, the Dubliner, positioned itself in Spinola Bay, because it has one of the most beautiful views in the world. But when we look at the economy, and when I look at particularly different aspects of the economy, financial services are hugely important. But that wasn't always the case. It's only when we look back at the vision that FinanceMalta had when it began, when you actually go right back to the 60s and to the 70s, and look at what Malta represented then. And if you look at the early 90s, moving into 2004 when Malta joined the EU, and then in 2008 when Malta joined the Euro, it was that vision that has created what is now the International Financial Services Centre right here in Malta. And that's not a physical place like it is in Dublin. In Dublin, I can go to the IFSC. In Malta, you're different. In Malta, international financial services are intangible. They're everywhere. And whether I go to Sweehy, or whether I would go to right down to the branch of BOV in Hamroon, or whether right in the centre of Valletta, or whether in the new investment centre and training centre in Xera, the financial services are absolutely everywhere. And when I look at tourism, as I look at tourism, I have sent lots and lots of people to this island, lots and lots of people over the years. I often say to people, if you ever feel a little bit of the island is starting to feel like you're dipping into the sea, it's for all of the tourists that I've sent over that are congregating in various different parts of this island. But when I look at tourism, I think what Malta has done with tourism is that it has taken it and dissected it and built it up bit by bit. I have been here as a business tourist, where I've spoken at conferences where nobody ever turns down a trip to Malta, ever. Why would they? But it's not just that, it's not just the weather. And when I hear people talking about Malta as the 300 days of sunshine that it has, personally, I feel it misses the point. Because Malta has far more than that. Its people are its sunshine. Its people are draw the warm glow as you come over here. That's what's different. And it's also the plethora of offerings, whether it's the good, strong hospitality nature, whether it's the depth of culture that I see at the Limestone Heritage, or whether it is the plethora of topics. As if any of you look at the Times of Malta today, you'll see a range of the cultural festivals that go on. Whether it's what's happening next month in Tahali, or whether it is the various different festas that surround this island. Any of you that fly in down through fireworks in this country, you'll know what I'm talking about. So from a business tourism point of view, it's got a huge amount to offer. From a gourmet perspective, anybody who likes food, you can't pass this island. You simply can't. Me, I have to go on a diet before I arrive, and then I have to go on a diet after I go home as well. That's what always happens here, because I'm in training before I get here. And so to the gourmet tourist, there's a huge amount to offer. And then when I look at history, when I look at what happened, when I just saw the impact of the media around the world on when the Azure window fell in Gozo, those of you who are from the Republic of Gozo, as I'm always reminded, will know the importance of that. As you go to the three cities, or as you sit in the silent city of Mdina, or you have cake in Fontanella, or you sit in rickshaw in Attard, or you walk around the San Antonio Gardens, you too will see the depth of history and the historical various different offering that is here in Malta. And then, of course, the other group of people that Malta has done exceptionally well at attracting are families. This island is one of the most family-focused nations that I have ever come across. So whether it is the offerings, whether it's all of the parks right throughout the promenade and Sliema, etc., that I can see is a huge offering, huge offering to families that come here. So financial services, and you've already heard about technology, you've already heard about tourism. They are the strengths of Malta, and this is what will see this country throughout. But there's one other aspect that I want to talk about from a financial point of view. In fact, further, the financial markets point of view. And that is that this is something that really hurt us in Ireland back in 2010, specifically, and 11 and so on, is that if you look at who buys Malta's debt, so for the international among you, the MGSs, the Maltese government stocks, most of the debt that is issued, both corporate and government here, is absorbed by the local market. And that gives this country and its bond yield a sense of resilience and robustness that unfortunately Ireland didn't have. We didn't have it in 2010. And it's because 3/4 of our debt was bought by international countries. So therefore, when we had what was called panic selling, which of course led us to the steps of the IMF, that was a key issue. But when I came over here, I was invited by the University of Malta in May 2011 to address them to speak about one issue, which was, what can Malta learn from Ireland's lessons? And that day, I had a range of the board members of BOV, I had many members of the Irish diaspora, I had a number of your prolific economists. A huge audience came to that conference, or to that event that evening. And there were two things that I said. Number one is I said, take care of that. Take care of the people who buy your debt, and make sure that you are always responding to their needs. And when I hear today, as I've just arrived here since last Saturday, when I hear today that for the first time in quite some time, the MGS, the price of the MGSs fell, and the impact that that's having on reputation here in this country, it just shows me you really listened. Because here in particular, you continue to absorb your own debt, which means that yes, you are giving the yield from the government to the people, but subsequently that the people are responding to the government. But the other thing that you have, which I think is very, very key and which has brought you right throughout the crisis, right throughout, as I heard your Prime Minister and the Minister for the Digital Economy speak about before, is you came right throughout the crisis in a different way than most. Because what you did was that when I was here, started to come here in 2011, you had the best performing economy of the EU, despite being relatively new additions to it. And further than that, you had the fastest growing employment in the EU at the time as well. And I questioned why. I questioned why was it, and particularly, remember, I was coming from a very different place at the time, and I questioned why. And I looked into it, and it was particularly because of the prudence exerted by the banks. It was the prudence and the conservatism, again, of the Maltese people. So then when I spoke to people in the various different banks, the staff, because it's the staff at branch level tell me exactly what's going on a regionalised and localised basis. And I said, what happens if somebody can't get a mortgage here? What happens? And they said, well, we'll tell you what we do, Susan, is first of all, we offer them a monthly savings programme so that then they can build up the reputation with the bank. And then I said, what happens then? What happens if that doesn't work? They said, there's actually a huge amount of intra-family lending. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, if somebody can't get a mortgage in this country, they don't turn to the next competitor bank, they turn to their family members. And therefore, that is how wealth and property and so on moves on down. And then I thought to myself, I have many's a Sunday, many a Sunday, sat in a restaurant on my own and stood out like a sore thumb. Not just because of the Irish accent, but because I'm sitting on my own. Now, any of you that come here and aren't from Malta, you spend one Sunday here and you will be absolutely sure you're not in your home country. Because the focus of family, you see the style. Do you know what it's like to pack as a woman to come to this country? The style here is unbelievable. And as I watch Sundays and as I look what happens, I see the buffets and I see the afternoon tea and I see gangs of families going everywhere together. You see the car parks of churches are full at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Because again, we're back to the same point. Because family looks after family here. And that is the utmost strength of Malta. So when I think about how we have engaged with this country, and we've engaged with clients here, I often say, I'm like a Maltese cousin. I'm here, but I'm not that far away. And when I'm gone, I'm always welcomed back again. But one thing is sure, though, is that I probably will never see the inside track. Because like Ireland, Malta, it is an island nation. And it is a country that guards itself. It takes care of itself. It takes care of its own. Sometimes to the point of view where coming from the outside in, you can feel like, I'm not quite sure I'll ever fit in here. But then you get to realize that it's not just the fact that you won't ever fit in here, it's that they have such a way of doing things themselves. And that includes business, that includes government issues, that includes tourism, and yes, that includes the language. But there is another aspect, and that is that in Malta, any one of you again that has travelled here, you will recognize that everyone speaks English. Well, the vast majority of people speak English. But it's funny, you know, when I watch an argument happen, of which there are many in Malta, and it's not that they're arguments, they're more like just Maltese conversations. And you know, and I have watched Maltese conversations happen where I think these people are going to fall out. And then 2 seconds later, they're sharing a coffee and saying, all right. And as I've watched that, and also I'll tell you something else, they're very innovative with their swearing. When they start teaching you a few swear words, you'll realize they can, far more innovative than we ever were anyway, I can tell you that much. But what I've noticed is that the English language is key. Because people often talk about Ireland having that benefit. We are now, will be, the only fully English-speaking country in the EU post-Brexit. And that's true. Yes, we will. But on the other hand, Malta has it as well. Malta has that offering. But you also have those cultural ties back to the UK in many ways also. And in many ways, they go back historically, they go back culturally, and yes, Malta does vote for the UK in the Eurovision. That also helps too. So when I look at the plethora of strengths that Malta has, it's a plethora of them. And all of those, if you open up the FinanceMalta brochure as you walk in, which that book has grown in thickness since I started coming here, that is Malta's value proposition. It comes to its people, its work ethic, its community, its family, its economy, its government bond market, its tourism, and also financial services and technologies. They are Malta's strengths. So am I going to stand up here and tell you that it's all good? Well, unfortunately, there's a W in SWOT as well. So what are the weaknesses in Malta? Well, there's 3 that I see. Number 1, and all of you Maltese here will empathize with me here, and that is infrastructure. Unfortunately, Malta was not built for as many people as are on the island now, which is approximately around 430,000. But Malta's population can almost triple during the highest of the holiday season. So the infrastructure is an issue. And if Malta is going to pursue a range of opportunities to bring more business and more people here, that is going to be an issue. Now, I have never seen as many cranes as I have over the Spinola Bay horizon as I did when I went for a walk on the prom during the week. So I can see that that's changing. But we do need to be cognizant of that. And the second W that I see, and I'm not quite sure if it's a weakness, but it's an uncertainty for me, and that is I'm not sure what Malta really wants. I'm not sure. Because I don't just talk to people who are sitting in this room. Yesterday I had a conversation with a waiter in the Corinthia Marina Hotel. And on the way over here this morning, I asked the taxi driver what he thought of Brexit. And over the years, I have had a chance to talk to people who are not from here, who are from here. People who have spent all of their generations all the way back. I've spoken to them, and I've asked them, what do they want? What specifically do they want post-Malta, or sorry, post-Brexit? And I'm not quite sure, because some people say we don't want any more people to come here. Malta is beautiful as it is. We have our tourists, we have our business. I'm not sure we can handle any more. And other people say to me, well, yes, we want to expand our range of digital services. We want to expand financial services, etc. So as I stand back and I look and I think about, if I was Dr. Joseph Muscat, what is it that I would do? What would I do in order to bring everybody with me? If I was to go to Abrach, and I was to go to Marsa Scala, and I was to go to Marcia Slock, and I was to go to Valletta, and I was to ask everyone, what do they want? If they could design what Malta would look like, what would they say? And that, I think, is key. I think it's pivotal as you now look forward. And by the way, that's exactly what Ireland did. That is exactly what Ireland did. What we did, and I was part of it, we had what was called a civic all-island dialogue. And what that was we brought all parties of civic society together. So we invited the trade unions. We invited members of the Irish diaspora. We invited members of the various different sectors right around the country. We invited the government parties. We invited the other government parties. We invited people from north of Ireland. We invited people from south of Ireland. And we pulled together 350 people in Dublin Castle, and I moderated one of those sessions. And what we did was we asked people, what do you want? And you know what the answer was? We know what we want, but what about the people that we represent? We need to have further discussion here. So then what we did was we went into the regions. We went into the boreens, as we call them in Ireland. We went to towns, we went to villages, we went to cities. We pulled people together and we said, what is it that you want the Irish people to be represented as? What is it that you're looking for? And then we all came back together again last January, and that is how Ireland defined what it sought out from Brexit. So therefore, we were very proactive. We needed to be proactive. We had to be proactive. Believe you me, if I'm speaking about Brexit in Ireland, I would be speaking about things in very, very different terms because of the reliance that we have on trade from that point of view. So now let me move on to the threats before I finish with the opportunities. And that is, to me, the threats are actually quite small. To me, the threats are, well, let me first of all start with the numbers. 1.4% of exports from Malta go to the UK. Just 1.4%. Now that is dramatically lower than what it was back in the 1970s. And it's even particularly in between, that has been a declining trend. Even since Malta joined the EU, since that point in time, exports have been falling to the UK. Now exports as a whole have been rising. But actually, I'm not necessarily worried about exports from Malta to the UK as a result of Brexit. That's not what concerns me at all. For what concerns me is Malta's exports to the EU. Because if Brexit leads on to a European recession, or if it leads on to some sort of declining in activity of the various different key sectors that I mentioned earlier, if they're the ones that go into decline, that will affect Malta more so. So it's from that point of view I'm concerned, is the economic impact of Brexit on the EU is what concerns me about what happens here in Malta. And I'll give you another figure. 30% of visitors in Malta are from the UK. 30%. Now, all you have to do is walk down. If you walk from Spinola Bay and you walk as far as Teenay Point, you will hear many, many, many British accents. You'll hear a few Irish ones as well. And as an Irish person, I generally go up and ask them kind of what they're doing here. You know, that's the way us Irish operate. If we see someone that sounds like us, we're inclined to welcome them wherever they are. And I've often heard those accents along the way, and I just think, you know, what would happen if the decline in purchasing power in the UK, which we already hear about, you probably have all heard what happened last Thursday, Super Thursday in the Bank of England, where Mark Carney came out and said, now inflation in the UK is 2.7%. It was 0.3% last February, 12 months. That's a huge increase, and all of that is what us economists called imported inflation. So from that point of view, I would be concerned about the tourist figures from that regard. And by the way, let me give you a more meaningful figure. 30% of British visitors in Malta equates to 9.6% of Maltese GDP. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Well, okay, let me put that into context for you. 10% of UK GDP is related solely to financial services. So you just think about that. Think about the size of the city. Think about all of the media headlines that indeed the FT and others have been focusing on about whether Lloyds would move or whether HSBC would move, etc. So in essence, financial services to the UK is like British tourists to Malta. So that's what concerns me as well. But as I come towards the end of my presentation here to you today, let me now focus on the opportunities. Number one, last year, I am a member of London Chamber of Commerce because as you heard earlier, we do business in Ireland, the UK, the US and Malta. But last year I got an email from the London Chamber of Commerce on the 1st of February, which was my wedding anniversary, so I took it as a good omen. I got an email to say that they were leading a trade delegation to Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah. So I went back and I inquired about it, and I subsequently went on it. And I asked the London Chamber, why particularly are you focusing on there? And they said, we have to prepare and to be proactive for what will happen post-Brexit. We need to develop our relationships outside of the EU and specifically within the Middle East. Instantly Malta came to mind, because you understand the Middle East more than any other country in the EU. You are, as you say yourselves, strategically close to them. You're strategically close to Northern Africa. And if this is what the UK wants, give it to them. Go to the UK and say to them, we will help you. We will help you to develop trade links over there. Strengthen those historical and cultural ties with commercial ties. And that is one key area. You're doing it anyway. You are doing it anyway. You understand them better than anybody. You are close to them. They like here. They understand here. Your language is close. Your language derives partly from Arabic in the first place. Think about that. And think about the importance, the depth and the breadth of that opportunity. Now the second one is in the case of the Enterprise Europe Network. And now I want to tell you, in the little time that I've left, now I want to tell you a little bit about how I got started here. I started my company, would you believe, the week the IMF came to town. And at that stage, I made a promise to myself, and I said, right, I will take the very first opportunity that I get to bring this company international. The very first one that I get, I'm going to take. And it didn't take long. Dublin Chamber sent me an email to say that a trade delegation from Malta was coming to Dublin. And many of you will have met Dr. Bernice Buttigieg on the way in. She was there at that particular time. Now, I'll never forget it. There was snow on the ground. The Maltese were frozen, absolutely frozen. They'd never seen snow. They were taking pictures of it. Anyway, so there was snow on the ground, and the trade delegation arrived over. And I went in and I sat down and I met with people and I said, hi, I'm Susan, what do you do? And so on. And afterwards I came away and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to think about going over there and just seeing what will happen. So anyway, God bless Michael O'Leary. I checked out Ryanair.com and a return flight to Malta on the second week in January 2011, €30 return. God bless him and spare him long, as my granny would say. Anyway, I went back to FinanceMalta via the Enterprise Europe Network, and I met the most fabulous woman called Lizzie-Anne Patch. She's over here. She works here in FinanceMalta. And I said, I am interested in getting started here. Can you help me? And she says, I can. What do you want? And I said, to meet people. And she says, who? And I said, anyone. She said, could you be more specific? And I said, I kissed the Blarney Stone when I was 10. I am happy to talk to anyone. Anyway, I said, could I meet people in finance? And I kid you not, Lizzie Ann came back to me with an itinerary with 15 meetings. One of them was with our chair here today, Kenneth Farrugia, and Bernice again at the time. 15 meetings they put on for me. I didn't have to lift a finger. And afterwards, I said to Lizzie Ann, I said, I'm really, really appreciative for all that you've done to help me get started here. And she says, no, Susan, we're appreciative that you decided to come back out here and to build a business in this country. And then the third thing that happened was then I went to Malta Enterprise, who I'd met in Dublin at the time. And I said, I'm thinking of coming back over. Can you help me? And they said, absolutely. What would you like? And I said, well, could I meet with you? They said, not alone can you meet with us. We will provide you with a driver for the week for all of the meetings that Lizzie Ann put together. So off I came, January 2011, with my meetings in one hand, my chauffeur in the other, and this was it. Malta was open for business. Now, how that actually happened, right? Because I've told you about the people, but let me tell you about the underlying infrastructure. How that actually happened was what's called Enterprise Europe Network. An Enterprise Europe Network, what it does is it joins all of the chambers of commerce in the European Union and beyond together. So there are 4,000 people as a de facto result working in that organization. What it does is it's real joined up thinking to link everyone together. So that is how Marion in Dublin Chamber spoke to Lizzie Ann in FinanceMalta. And you know what else? That London Chamber contact that I told you that I had, that's also how I found out about them. And further with Enterprise Europe Network, how that works is that trade mission I told you about to Abu Dhabi, Sharjah and Dubai, that cost me £150 sterling. £150 sterling, that was all. The rest was subsidised by the Enterprise Europe Network. So Enterprise Europe Network is an EU Commission funded body, as I say, that joins up all of these organisations together. So why am I telling you about it today? Well, I'm telling you for a specific reason, and that is because all of you here in front of me can engage with Enterprise Europe Network. It is the biggest business network in the world. And what it is it's a forum for people like me to say, I am interested in doing business in X country with X offering in such a way where I would like to meet Y people. And that's what it does. It brings everyone together. So for any of you, whether you're Maltese or whether you're international here today, you can engage in Enterprise Europe Network to build your own business offering thereafter. So, as I say, number one is developing trade relations in the Middle East and to emphasize those to the UK. And the second thing is to engage with Europe, with the opportunities right throughout Europe through Enterprise Europe Network. Number three, I believe the greatest opportunity that Malta has, well, not the greatest one of them, is in your financial services sector. It's right here. It's in this room. Because when I look at the businesses in the UK, of which I deal with quite a number, but when I talk to businesses in the UK, they want a foothold in the EU. There's no doubt about that. They want a foothold in the EU, but they're not quite sure where to go. So do you go to Dublin? Do you go to Luxembourg? Do you go to Frankfurt? Do you go to Paris? Now, of course, I should be standing here and telling you all to come over and drink a pint of Guinness in Temple Bar, and we will welcome you with open arms. But the thing is that there's enough for us all to go around. And Malta can put itself forward. It can put itself forward, and all of the things, all of the strengths that I told you about earlier. You have got what it takes in terms of the language, you've got the infrastructure, you've got the incentives, you've got the people, and you have got, particularly what I'm really impressed with on a growing basis, is you've got the educational systems also to underpin it. When I hear the students that I'm talking to now who are in my training courses here, when I hear the courses that they're doing, it's diplomas and charters and a plethora of other different elements in stockbroking, financial services, recommendations on financial advice, MiFID II, understanding regulation. And you know what they're also doing? Do you know what also I'm hearing as well on the front line? Is they're also doing an awful lot of online courses with universities within the UK. Yesterday I had a meeting with PwC in Malta, in Ormy. And PwC and our company have been doing business for a little while now. And one of the people that I met over there said to me, you know, how is it that we could create a tie, an educational tie between the UK and Europe, where you can take the best of financial services thinking there, and via online or via our very, very well-serviced flight network, could we facilitate London or at least UK education right here in Malta? And that's the type of joined-up thinking that I think is going to serve this country better and better and better. And the fourth opportunity, and it's a really, really key one, is this all began, like, at the end of the day, Malta will go down in history because it was you who held the EU presidency when Article 50 was triggered on the 29th of March 2017. You'll go down in history for that. But it's your chance not just to shape the present. It's not just that. It's your chance to shape the future. Now, in Ireland, we're very concerned about the fact that we are now going to be a more peripheral island as a result of losing, who is now one of our greatest friends within the EU. We're concerned about that. So, as I've been watching Brexit, and I have watched a lot of things happen with Brexit over the years, months particularly, but over the years too, and now it's likely to see, we will see power shift towards the east and towards the south, closer to you in both counts. So now is Malta's opportunity to shape the agenda. You are not a small island with a small population. You are a very, very strong, resilient people with a massively strong value proposition. You bring a lot to the EU. There's no doubt about it. My company wouldn't be here if you didn't. You bring a lot to the EU. And therefore, now is your chance to make sure that your voice is heard. We heard about the European Court of Justice announcement this week about how a trade deal may well be seen in the future. Every country matters. And it's up to you, and I know that there's a general election happening, but it's up to you to make sure that your voice is heard and that Malta's views and its people and its work ethic and everything that you hold dear, it is up to you to make sure that that voice is heard as we shape the future of the EU. Because this is our chance now. Yes, Brexit for Ireland is a big worry, but it has to be an opportunity too. We have to look at it that way. I didn't want Brexit to happen. I truly didn't. I was utterly saddened on the 24th of June 2016, but we can't think like that anymore. We have to think, what do we do now? And as a business person and as a citizen of the EU, I believe that truly for us now is an opportunity to shape the way we want to go further. But we have to be proactive. Yes, we have to stick together, there's no doubt about that, but we have to think about what can we do to make it better for not just us and our businesses and our own people, but further afield. How can we think further? So on that note, I'm going to wish you a truly wonderful conference. I do hope that there's lots of key elements spoken about here. I spoke myself at a conference last Friday about fintech, so you're, as usual, right on trend. And thank you, truly, truly, thank you for welcoming me and my business to this fabulous country. Thank you very much.